Empty hotels for the 2026 World Cup. The 2026 World Cup isn't filling hotels. The warning that threatens the big $30 billion business. In fact, as they tell us here, hotels in New York fear a less profitable 2026 World Cup than expected. This is pretty serious, guys. Let's continue. 80% of the hotels in the 2026 World Cup host cities in the United States are reporting fewer bookings than expected. But be careful, this isn't just happening in the United States, it's also happening in both Mexico and Canada. That's right, just as you heard. Please, let's take a look. They report very slow progress in hotel bookings for the 2026 World Cup. Despite the excitement for the World Cup, hotel bookings in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey are below normal levels. For the opening match, occupancy is barely around 36% according to industry data. 36% occupancy. For the World Cup opening, obviously it's normal for these numbers, for these figures to increase as the days go by, but guys, there's not much time left. 1 month to the World Cup. Let's continue. Experts point out that the demand hasn't disappeared, but it will come later and be more concentrated. They even acknowledge that the impact of the World Cup might be overestimated, since these events don't always attract as many international crowds as expected. The government expects 5.5 million tourists, but the current numbers are still far from that goal. Guadalajara leads in occupancy with around 50% during some matches. The trend is also seen in Canada and the United States, while destinations like Cancun have not managed to attract more visitors because of the tournament. Incredible. We're hearing that here too. In addition, safety remains one of the main concerns for tourists, which could influence the arrival of travelers. Of course. I think the issue of safety, feeling unsafe, is something that makes many people afraid, but I don't think it's the only reason, because as I said, the problem also happens both in the United States and in Canada. If you ask me, there are multiple reasons, multiple motives, but the main one is obviously the prices. I mean, it's what it costs to go to the World Cup. Obviously, that's the biggest reason of all. Not only because a ticket for the World Cup can cost you up to 10 times more than it did in Qatar, but also, let's remember several countries, or rather several teams, have to constantly change venues, and not just venues, sometimes even countries. Guys, there are teams that play in 2 different countries in the World Cup that have to go to the United States and then have to go to Mexico. It's crazy. So that makes it extremely complicated for the vast majority of people. For example, in Qatar, everything was concentrated in a small geographic area. You could move from stadium to stadium on the metro. Also, public transportation was free. Do you know how convenient that is? And many times you would book your hotel room and stay there for the entire World Cup. So obviously it's much more convenient, much easier. You don't have to be traveling constantly, unlike this World Cup, which is crazy. And as if that wasn't enough, let me remind you that these countries, Mexico, the United States, and Canada, unfortunately don't have good public transportation. Or at least not as advanced as other countries like Qatar. I mean, public transportation is pretty poor, and most of the time you have to drive or pay for an Uber. In New York, you have to pay, guys, I mean, people in New York have to pay for a subway. Like how much? $125 for a subway. It's crazy. Paying that much for the subway makes no sense, guys. It's outrageous just to get to the stadium. So you get an idea, in Qatar the subway was free. Just imagine that. Free. That says it all. So honestly, obviously that's the main reason, but now we're going to look at more of it now. Here they tell us, the World Cup doesn't fill hotels in Miami. FIFA returns rooms. Just look at that. Here they keep telling us, it was promised that the World Cup would give Miami tourism a boost as invigorating as a good cup of coffee, filling the hotels to the brim. However, with less than 2 months until the opening match, the reality is more like a cup of weak decaffeinated coffee. Bookings are not meeting the expectations that had been set. FIFA has returned rooms it had reserved for fans in several hotels. Something similar happened in Mexico. Just imagine. In addition, fewer hotels signed contracts with the tournament's organizing body than initially expected. The World Cup is still expected to give a boost to tourism. Of course, it's normal for more tourists to come, more than usual. That's what's normal. But, well, not to the extent projected by Miami's hotel industry leaders. Of course, I think this is the comment that's closest to reality. I mean, don't think that tourists won't come. Don't think that soccer fans won't come. Of course, a lot of them will come, but fewer than what was initially projected. That's what's happening. Let's continue. And unless the situation improves quickly, which is still possible, the biggest World Cup ever held could end up becoming a missed opportunity for South Florida. The expectations were extremely high, and I'm worried that maybe we won't be able to meet them, said the general manager of the Miami Beach Hotel. Okay, it's crazy. Honestly, the situation is really bad, and it's gotten to the point that even Donald Trump talked about the prices. Just look at this. Trump criticizes ticket prices for the 2026 World Cup. Trump criticized the high ticket prices for the 2026 World Cup, saying he wouldn't pay for them because he was asked about it. Hey, it costs $1,000 and Trump said that's for a World Cup ticket. Look, guys, Trump is what people in the United States call a billionaire. I mean, the guy has a lot of money. He's not only the president of the United States, but also a tycoon. And the fact that we've reached the point where even he thinks a World Cup ticket is expensive, I think that says it all. Let's be honest, guys. $1,000 for a ticket. $1,000. It's unaffordable. I mean, look, the money is there. If you can pay for it, I get it. A lot of people can even save up and maybe pay to go to the World Cup. Okay, but the question is it worth spending the money on this? I don't think so. Look, when you saw the tickets for Qatar, maybe yes. For Qatar, it was probably worth it. But for this, guys, $1,000. And then to see them face who? Who are they going to play against? Against Egypt? Come on.
Please.
I mean, for God's sake, Haiti against the Cayman Islands. Please? I mean, as if that wasn't enough, let me remind you that more teams entered this World Cup, so the competitive quality of the tournament plummeted, since instead of 32, there will be 48 teams. And be careful, because FIFA even wants to add more for the next World Cup.
Hotels in Mexico and the United States expected record business during this World Cup.
And well, it didn't happen.
Well, it turns out that business is down and it's for completely different reasons.
Look, the exact same thing is happening in Canada. Take note.
Let me explain. We're 36 days away from the start of the biggest tournament in history. But yesterday, the American Hotel Association reported that 80% of their hotels are below their reservation projections. And in Mexico, things are the same or even worse, with occupancy rates below 40% in the 3 host cities. Why are we seeing occupancy rates below 40%? Because hoteliers raised rates so much, they drove out average budget fans. Just to give you an idea, in Mexico City, prices went up by 961%. It's the highest increase among the 3 host cities.
But let me remind you, it's not just the hotels, it's also the ticket prices. And on top of that, as if that weren't enough, fans also have to pay for flights too. Suddenly you have to watch your team play, I don't know, in Mexico City, and then that same team plays a match in Miami, and then plays another match in Atlanta. It's crazy.
But Guadalajara and Monterrey aren't far behind, with more than a 400% increase in their prices. Give me a break. They raised their prices so much, betting on a demand that just isn't showing up. And now they have empty rooms that apparently only people who aren't necessarily here to watch soccer can afford. But there's something I don't understand here, and I need you to help me figure it out in the comments. Because there were 5 million tickets sold. Demand from dozens and dozens of countries. That is, the demand is real, but the hotels are empty. And if you think they're staying in Airbnbs instead, that's not happening either. Because they've also reported that their occupancy rates are below 50% in most of the host cities. I don't have the answer, but I do have a theory. And it's because, as a result of this focus on hospitality, on VIP experiences, on tickets being so expensive like they were in this World Cup, a lot of the fans are going to be domestic corporate guests, and not necessarily those international fans who come to support their national team.
It could be, you know? It could be. There's a very real possibility that many of the fans will be people who live in that same city. That this will happen during this World Cup, I see it as quite likely. But what do you think, guys? Disaster is coming. We'll document everything that happens with this World Cup. Ladies and gentlemen, see you next time.